Welcome to The Buzz. I'm Christopher Conover. Beer is a growing business in Arizona, but just like so many other things, it felt the pinch of the pandemic and supply chain problems. So grab a pint as we spend this week learning about the industry. More than 24 craft breweries call Southern Arizona home. If you're a beer aficionado or just looking for a cold pint, you are sure to be able to find any type of beer you like, from pilsners to sours to IPAs and stouts. The breweries felt the economic pinch of the pandemic as much as many others in the hospitality industry, but some thrived. Eric Sipe, an owner of Dillinger Brewing, says they even managed to open a new location in downtown Tucson during the pandemic.
There was a lot of luck involved. We had been planning on doing an expansion, so we were already in a good place financially. And then I was kind of an early believer that this was going to be a big deal. I had a trip overseas that I was supposed to go to in April. So by the time it reached Spain, which is where I was going, I was looking around and saying, guys, there's 50 cases in Madrid. I don't know if I can go. So by about January, I'd already started kind of pulling back a little bit, being a little more cautious and saying, oh, maybe we'll have to wait an extra, 2 months and see where it goes. But it was a lot of dumb luck and then a lot of goodwill from the rest of the people of Tucson that really wanted to start supporting local, that kind of let us be able to keep expanding.
Let's talk about that. There has, over the last few years, a lot of breweries have popped up. How hard a business is this?
It's really hard. There's kind of still a little bit of room in this market, but if you were trying to open up a brewery in San Diego or Denver or Portland, I would probably advise against it. Tucson still has a lot of room for growth, though. So really, it's just kind of location dependent still.
What makes Tucson still have room for growth?
Well, none of us are that big. I mean, a couple of them have done big expansions you can find statewide, but a lot of these places still operate as like mom and pop brew shops, which is what mine is. That's what we are. I mean, you'll still find me behind the bar a couple days a week. And I think that style still has its place, where people will know the owner, they'll know who the brewer is, and they'll feel more personally invested in its success. Whereas like the giant mega corporations with $100 million worth of equipment, those ones might start fading off a little bit in comparison.
Yeah, we won't talk about any of those by name, like the ones that have the big Clydesdale horses or the Rocky Mountains or any of those. But, you said you're still small, local mom and pop, but we can find some of your beer in local grocery stores, at local bars, so you've managed to get out of just the tap room.
I'm still canning those things myself. So if you're getting a can of Dillinger beer anywhere in this state, my hand has put that in the 4-pack. So still mom and pop, still me doing it. If it's a keg of beer, it's most likely our head brewer, but a can, that is me. So we can still expand, but it's still me.
What is it about beer and Southern Arizona? Because we've got breweries down in Cochise County. What is it that has allowed it to do so well here? We're not Phoenix with 4 million people at the doorstep.
We're still a million. There's still a lot of people here. And there still is a pretty strong community aspect that wants to support local and buy local. And, like my wife will buy any bag that has a saguaro or a prickly pear on it. People will buy any beer if it's Tucson over the same thing coming out of somewhere else. We want to support local.
So when did you guys open, and whose big idea was it to open a brewery in Tucson?
So it's actually me and a college buddy. We opened up just a little bit over 5 years ago. We had our 5th year anniversary party 2 weeks ago. We had come up with this idea in college. We had gotten jobs in the industry afterwards. And after maybe 3 or 4 years, we decided it's time to take the plunge and opened up. then we've just been running it however we've been able to since then. There was 3 years of normal operation, and now we're 2 years into COVID operation, but it's worked somehow for us.
And of course, your Dillinger Brewing, you expanded to right here on the edge of downtown in the shadow of Hotel Congress, temporary home of Dillinger himself.
Right, and this was a bakery when he was caught, and you can't prove that he did not eat here. Maybe I can't prove that he did, but you can't prove that it didn't happen.
So, how's business been here at this new location?
I'm very happy. It's been good. Um, Obviously, I don't have too much to compare it to. So maybe someday I'll have a normal year of operation where I don't have lockdowns. But for the time being, I'm happy. It was the right call for us.
When it came to the pandemic, was being small actually an advantage?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We actually turned our brewery into a drive-through when it first happened and would release a video every single day promoting the drive-through. So nothing like asking for your support or saying we're all in this together, only dumb, funny videos every day. And people loved it. So just by being able to sell out of the tap room, we were able to pay everybody. No one got laid off. We were able to pay our bills and stay in operation. Where if we were larger, I don't think that would have been the case.
So, what's the future for Dillinger? What's next?
That is a very good question. I have decided that I don't ever want to go into anything alone anymore, and I'm going to try to team up with as many other local businesses as I can. I am not going to announce anything right now, but there are a few very fun projects that could be coming in the next couple months, so stay tuned. But I think once we've done that next series of new ideas, I'll be in a pretty happy place.
You mentioned teaming up with people. How much do all of you, the local brewers and local brewery owners, talk to each other and support each other?
Constantly, constantly. It's very much a community where we believe that a rising tide lifts all ships. It is all of us together creating a culture of craft beer here in town. So we always try to be as supportive of each other. If you ask me for recommendations, I'll tell you every single one. It's a very good community to be a part of.
That was Eric Sipe, one of the owners of Dillinger Brewing in Tucson. We all remember the pictures at the end of last year of acres of shipping containers and dozens of cargo ships offshore, all waiting to be unloaded. That was part of the supply chain crisis that hit the U.S. Rob Fulmer, the executive director of the Arizona Craft Brewers Guild, says beer makers were caught up in that supply chain slowdown.
I like to think of our breweries as sort of being bellwethers for a lot of different things because they're manufacturers, they are restaurateurs in a lot of cases, they are community gathering places. So, we have a slight touch with agriculture. Some of our grain byproducts are used for farmers' fields and things like that. So, we're running into the gamut. Of course, I mentioned restaurants. I'm sure that you've heard or have seen, simple things like bottles of ketchup because everyone switched to packet ketchup, those kinds of things. But specifically for the brewing industry, we were running into shortages in some of the equipment because it's stainless steel or it's aluminum, and there were tariffs on those, and that sort of really slowed the process down. A lot of that stuff is just-in-time stuff coming from overseas, so we're part of that shipping container situation, and we're running into there's two main companies that produce the cans for canned beer, and one of them has jumped from half a truck to 5 truckloads, and that's basically 10,000 cans versus 1 million cans.
That's a big difference, especially for a small brewery.
Yeah, and they take up a lot of space. They're light, but they take up a lot of space. So we're struggling with that, and so when your larger companies with big supplies have to start to scramble, it really shakes up the entire situation. So we've got people looking for different kinds of lids because the lids they were supposed to get for the can may not be the ideal lid. Um, and so on and so on. We're hearing that because of climate conditions, the barley crop is not going to be as robust this year. So we'll see some things in the coming months on that. Um, and here in Arizona, we're obviously concerned about the water situation as well.
Has the supply chain issue, coupled with everything that was going on the last 2 years with the pandemic, have we seen a lot of breweries in Arizona just say, forget it, we can't do this anymore?
Well, I happen to work with some of the more resilient people in manufacturing and restaurateuring and all that. We're here at the office here. We have our own supply chain issues, believe it or not, but we're kind of inspired by the way they rolled with it. But it's certainly putting a stress on them as businesses. I think we did see in the early part of the pandemic, we saw two or three businesses decide to get out. I think it was just a storm of, hey, we're in our fifth year of our lease and this thing is going on, and maybe this lifestyle isn't what I thought it would be. So, but again, they've been pretty resilient. Um, and I think what's going to occur is kind of a slow kind of recession from what they're good at, and what they're good at is getting their favorite beers into consumers' hands. So if you were relying on your small brewery in your neighborhood cranking out 4 packs of 16-ounce cans for a lot of their products, there may be some attrition on that. They may be down to one, or they may slowly phase it out. And it's not the most profitable thing to have beer go outside a small brewery. It's more profitable to bring people in. But if that kept people engaged and brought people in, it was worth the expense.
You said you work with a lot of really resilient and creative people. What are some of those creative things that you've heard about brewers doing here in Arizona during all the supply chain problems and things like that?
Well, first of all, on the production side of the brewery, there is a lot of collaboration between brewers, packagers, and so there's a lot of sharing of resources. And there's always been hey, do you have a box of hops that we could sort of get right now, and we'll hit you back the next time. There's always been that sort of collaboration, and so there's just a lot more of it. Uh, the switch from uh, being a retail only place of gathering, draft beer, and maybe beer to go and crowlers or growlers. A lot of them invested during the pandemic in canning lines or struck up a agreement with a mobile canning operation. So the very fact that you're seeing cans explode, and almost every brewery has these to-go options and package is one of those things.
I had heard at one point that beer was recession proof. How overall did the craft brew industry, did Arizona brewers do during the pandemic and the economic downturn that followed?
There are some breweries, if you talk to them candidly, they're going to say that certain periods of this pandemic have been record breaking in terms of sales. Now, the heartbreak side of that is because they pared down on their labor, and that was a hard thing to let go. They the definition of a brewery is varied because they have different models. They have a tap room model, they have a production model, they might have a restaurant model. But I think they really identify it as being a team of people and a very inefficient labor source. We're not as automated as some of the big guys. So that was a heartbreaking loss to have to cut staff. And, it is something that to the mental well-being of all the staff and everybody involved, it's a short-term fix to really put all that on your shoulders. So we hope that eventually we'll get a return to labor on that.
Not to get in trouble with our millennial listeners, but I've heard that millennials are drinking less beer than previous generations like mine. Have you guys seen that?
we are seeing more seltzer products and things called ready to drink products that are cocktail like, and you can make those using malt. You can make those with wine or spirits. It's very labor intensive to do with malt, and that's the way our breweries would do that. Uh, so the threat is, if they're made with spirits from a very large multinational corporation, they're going to get all the supply chain advantage, and their price point's going to come down, and so they're taxed at a different rate. That sort of helps equalize that, but there is a movement to equalize the taxes. If you look at straight at the number that they're giving, um, it's unfair, but you have to look at the totality of those kinds of things. But getting back to your question, we can do those products. We took it upon ourselves as a guild to um, allow the definition of beer to include a wider range of products. You have a few innovators like Grand Canyon Brewing Company or Santan that are also getting into distilled spirits. We changed the law so that several entities could work under the same roof and be separately licensed. So you could have a winery, a brewery, and a distillery under what the consumer would see one roof, but it's separate businesses, and we're integrating that experience together. So that's how we're rolling with it. But we'll see these things kind of pendulum a lot, but definitely these alternate um, ready to drink things are something that we're looking at, and we had a hand in that because we we started to tell people you could actually get flavor out of beer, and now they're looking for flavor all over the place.
That was Rob Fulmer with the Arizona Craft Brewers Guild. You're listening to The Buzz. I'm Christopher Conover. This week we're talking with brewers and farmers about the business of beer in Arizona. In 2015, Melanie and Tom Norden opened Copperhop Ranch and Farm in Elgin, Arizona to grow hops and make beer. Mel says the business took off in ways they hadn't expected.
So our first year, we were not actually open as a microbrewery yet. We were just growing hops to get them established, and a really interesting thing happened. A couple of guys from Chandler were rolling past. I think they were out wine tasting. They were at Parker Canyon, like doing their thing, and these guys, I don't know if they knew about us or how they found us, but they drove into our property because our hops were up on the vine, and they were from Arizona Wilderness Brewing up in Chandler. And these guys source all Arizona products, all Arizona grain, all Arizona, hops if they can find them. And they showed up sharing beer and introduced themselves, and we had just picked all of our hops, and we were just going to store them or whatever, but we had air dried them on screens in our living room, and we had 15 different varieties, and we just put them in 55-gallon garbage bags, and they said, hey, can we buy your hops so we can make a beer with them? And I thought, well, yeah, sure. You guys can have them. And how much do you want from them? I had no idea what to charge for them. So we said, how about $50? They looked at us like we were crazy and tried to offer us more. And we're like, nah, that's, we don't even know if they're going to be any good the first year. So we gave them the hops in the garbage bags, and they said, listen, when we make our beer, we want you to come up to our brewery so you can taste what your hops are like in our beer. So they made a beer called the Connection Saison. So they invited us up, and it was awesome. We couldn't believe it. So we sold our first crop to them. Other breweries wanted our hops because they wanted to do a wet hop beer. But to do a real wet hop beer, you need to pick them and immediately put them into your brew kettle. So nobody was really ready. Either their product wasn't ready, or when it was time to pick the hops, they weren't going to be ready. So what we decided, my husband, Tom, and I, was that we were going to use our own hops, and we would make our own beer with our own hops. And we get 2 crops of hops a year, which is I don't think that happens anywhere else. I've never heard of it happening. So what we do is we let our patrons, our customers, if they want a wet hop, because we don't spray, we're totally organic. Our customers can go out there and pull them right off of the vine and stick them immediately into their beer. So they can wet hop on the spot, we like to say. You just want to go wet hop on the spot? This is probably the only opportunity you're ever going to get to do that. So we'll walk out and explain the different varieties and explain, what one hop is going to be like as opposed to another hop. So it could be more acidic or fruitier or, get that really strong IPA punch in your mouth. And so we let people choose what they want to try, including our hops that are almost extinct.
How did you guys do through the pandemic? We saw so many microbreweries just have to close their doors, as so many businesses did.
Surprisingly, we were really, really blessed. So I used to have a coffee cart. This is a really kind of a funny story. I had a coffee cart, which is considered a mobile food unit. It's licensed as a mobile food unit, which we have to use today, so we can do food. And because at the time mobile food units were considered essential during the pandemic, we got real creative. And we turned our mobile coffee cart into our mobile beer unit. And we put it at the front gate of our farm. And on Highway 83, there's a gigantic easement. And, it's a 2-lane highway. So people could be outside. They could distance themselves. I mean, car length. So my husband, poor fella, he was running back and forth between our tasting room, loading up pints of beer, which the governor actually allowed beer sales to go, which worked out great for us because we would get beer, we'd put lids on them, and he would run them out, and people could tailgate along the highway. And people, they needed to get out of the house. They were going crazy. So we had people up and down the highway, around our street. They would bring their pop-up tents so they could be outside with their families. People would bring lawn chairs and tailgate, up and down in front and around the highway around our farm. And whenever somebody would need to use the bathroom, we would only be able to allow one person in at a time. And my husband would have to go and bleach everything, after, everybody, we only had 1 or 2 people that ever used it, but he'd have to go in and bleach everything after everybody would use it. So he was getting his tail, ran off. But our business probably tripled during the pandemic because we recognized that people are human and they need to interact with each other. They need to get out in the sunshine and get some air and not get locked up and be in jail. And it's not my job to say what to do with somebody's life, but I needed a beer. So we made it possible for people like us to be able to get out safely and still be able to provide our customers what they wanted. And, we had Legion riders, Post 109 over here in Tucson, where we go. They saved our lives by coming out every weekend on their Harleys. And, they followed the rules, and they were such an amazing support for us. And then other people would see them, and then they would stop. And it just, word of mouth spread, and it allowed us to remain open during the pandemic safely. So, a shout out to everybody who came and supported us, because without them, we wouldn't have made it. So, I mean, we're tiny. We're not, We have a tiny, tiny tasting room and a patio and a farm and our house, and that's it. So without our local support, without the Legion Riders, Post 109, people came from the Grand Canyon because they found out that they could come and get beer and sit outside in a lawn chair. Came to get beer. So really, our locals, our Tucson folks, they saved our bacon. So we just really wanted to say thank you to them too, because without their help, we wouldn't be here. So that's how we survived.
You mentioned earlier that you have a unique type of hop on the property. Can you tell us a little more about that?
We have a local hop that is the oldest hop known to have survived the Ice Age. It's the oldest hop in the world. And it's located in the southern and kind of some parts up near, well, I don't want to say where because they're endangered. But they're down here near us. We have some of them, and we're breeding them so that they can survive. But they're the Neo-Mexicana, or the Neo-1. And they're on the endangered list. So if people find hops out in the wild, don't dig them up. Because if we lose them, they're gone forever. And these are so special.
That was Melanie Norden, one of the owners of Copperhop Ranch and Farm in Elgin, Arizona. And that's the buzz for this week. You can find all our episodes online at azpm.org and subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for The Buzz Arizona. We're also on the NPR One app. Megan Myskowski helped produce this week's show. Samantha Larned is our production assistant, and Jim Blackwood is our production engineer. Our music is by Enter the Haggis. I'm Christopher Conover. Thanks for listening.
Arizona Public Media's original programming is made possible in part by the Community Service Grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.